Welcome to the weekly news around Bali and Asia. My name is Bruce Pullman, and I'm going to be talking about the news every week. These are short newscasts about topics of interest to those of us that live or visit Bali or Asia. I'll be covering all of Asia and maybe a little bit in Melanesia, another of my interest. And I'm an anthropologist. This newscast is coming to you from the Peripatetic Anthropologist YouTube channel. Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly news around Bali and Asia. And my name is Bruce, and this is news for Friday, April 10th, 2020. And I'm a little late this week, as usual. And let's start off with talking about what else. The coronavirus, COVID-19, in Indonesia and Bali. So, Friday, April 10th. How many cases do we have in Indonesia? We have 3,293 confirmed cases, with 280 deaths. And the number has risen rapidly, almost doubled since April 2nd. So 8 days ago, the number has almost doubled. This is partially a response to increased testing. Indonesia received, as I mentioned before, I believe I mentioned it last week, we received 50,000 test kits, high-quality test kits from South Korea. Thank you, South Korea. And there's an additional 500,000 available right now. And so the government has undertaken rapid testing. And according to a report in the Jakarta Post dated April 9th, yesterday, the government will expand PCR testing for coronavirus, and this is going to be done at public hospital laboratories, public and private clinical laboratories, as well as state-owned virology laboratories and university research laboratories. And this is considered crucial in the battle against the pandemic. Indonesia has, at this point, listed today on the Worldometer website, 65 tests per 1 million population. So we have a population of approximately 265 million. We've tested 65 out of 1 million, and we can compare that with the United States, which is way behind. Thank you, President Trump, with 7,181 per million. Italy, 14,114 per million. Turkey, 3,277. So, I think you get the point. We've done almost nothing in testing thanks to the government's slow response and initial denials that the coronavirus was present in Indonesia. I don't need to go back over that fiasco again. So, as more and more testing is being done, numbers, of course, are going to go up. So, that's what we have in terms of numbers. And according to an article in the Batam News, the Tribune Batam, 24 doctors in Indonesia dead on duty against corona. That includes 18 doctors, 6 dentists, and this article doesn't mention any nurses, but I know that nurses have died as well. So our medical personnel are still dying. They still need equipment. They still need support. So, what's happening? How is the government responding to this? The president is still not going to issue a national lockdown because of economic considerations. But today, this morning, residents told to stay home for 2 weeks as Jakarta goes into partial lockdown. This is a report in the Jakarta Post. And so Jakarta's governor has urged all residents to stay at home for the next 14 days, traveling only when necessary. And the partial lockdown request was approved by the Health Ministry. This is part of what I mentioned before in last week's news report about the struggles between regional and local administrators and the national government about how to deal with the coronavirus. And so Jakarta's governor has gotten his way, at least partially, by being able to do this. And so he said, our purpose is not to ask everyone to stay at home, but to save our lives, save our families, our neighbors and colleagues, and to check the spread of the virus. He additionally explained that starting today, all companies must stop activities in their offices and send their employees to work from home. Now, that's not going to be possible for a lot of businesses, and there are a number of exceptions to this. This includes government offices, diplomatic and international organizations, state-owned and city-owned enterprises, as well as businesses in the fields of health, food supply, energy, communication, information technology, finance, logistics, construction, strategic industries, and basic services that serve everyday needs. Food vendors will be allowed to continue to operate, but only with takeout. Restaurants may not have people eating inside. Again, this is to stop the interaction of people in restaurants, the transmission of the virus from person to person. The people going outside are also obligated to wear masks, and the president announced that earlier this week. And so anyone that's outside is supposed to be wearing a mask. Is this happening? No, it's not. And I'm not going to post photos here, but on the social media, the Bali social media pages, there are a number of photos of foreigners wandering around the streets, trying to get into closed tourist attractions or shopping, not wearing masks. It's also happening in the Indonesian community as well. Good news in the fight against the coronavirus and keeping the people informed. Transparency. The Bali provincial government has a great little Facebook page that, and you can see it down here. Take a look if you're living in Bali, or if you're thinking about coming to Bali someday when the country is opened up again. They list all sorts of information, update on the number of cases, where they are, what the government is doing. It's very good and very welcome. The regional government has decided that the best way to get the public's cooperation in following some of the new rules and regulations is to keep them informed with what's happening. And this is in Indonesian and in English for those of you that don't read Indonesian. So, that's where we are with the virus. Some good news, not just in Indonesia but around the world. The skies are clearing. Interesting photo here of Jakarta with the reduction in Jakarta's famous or infamous traffic jams. You can see a blue sky, and if you take a look at photos from around the world in some of the major cities, Seoul, London, New York, Chicago, the world is clearing up. as we've stopped traveling in cars, motorbikes, buses, trains, trucks, planes. Should give us time to think about what we want to do in the future once the virus is contained, a vaccine is developed, about different ways to organize our society. We're working at home. What can we do educationally in terms of homeschooling? Cut down on our obsessive need to travel in vehicles by ourselves. Okay, let's go on. And the next story. What to do on stay-at-home days? Well, there have been all sorts of interesting suggestions on social media, and it's good to see that people are being creative rather than just whining about I'm bored. So last week I talked about, up here, I talked about a class I was taking on the science of well-being. And here's something else. What about learning another language? So I'm learning right now Korean, and I do that on a couple of different platforms. The one that I'm using the most now is Duolingo. It's free, and I've been, I'm still at the beginner's level. 안녕하세요. So it's interesting. Am I going to use this? Well, I have Korean friends that I talk to on the internet, and so it's kind of fun to say a word or two in Korean. Hopefully at some point I will get to at least a low beginning level of conversation. I'm looking forward to that, and this is something that you can do. Who knows, maybe when this is over you're going to want to take a trip, travel somewhere, learn Spanish, Turkish, Indonesian, Chinese, Korean. Duolingo has many different languages, so take a look at the link below if you want to go to Duolingo and learn another language, or maybe brush up on a language that you've learned but you haven't used in a long time. So something to do during those stay-at-home days other than eat, gain weight, I've gained a few kilos, and binge on Netflix. Okay, and for Bali news, well, there is a lot of news for Bali, and I want to keep these newscasts short, so I'm just gonna go over the broad a broad outline of what's happening here, and I think tomorrow or the next day I'll put another update on Bali on my No Name channel, kind of like I did last week. And so what's happening here? Well, so testing has started in Bali, and we are now up to 64. If I'm not mistaken, let me check my number here. It was 49 yesterday, and then there were another 15 added, so we now have 64 positive cases in Bali, and we can expect to see more as testing continues. Most of these are Indonesians, 7 are foreigners, and there has been a decision to put all of our coronavirus patients, all the confirmed patients, in one hospital, Udayana University. This is in order to keep other hospitals from having to deal with the virus and possibly infecting staff and patients in other hospitals. A good move, and so Udayana is going to be the center of corona virus patients control, and that's a good move for us. What's happening with work? Well, it's not looking good. Over 1,200 hotels have been closed in Indonesia, throughout Indonesia, over the last few weeks, and that includes a minimum of 56, last count that I saw, a minimum of 56 hotels in Bali, and with that, then resulting loss of jobs for the workforce. In addition to that, there are over 7,000 guides in Bali, 7,000, and no one to guide. So they're out of work. Wedding photographers. I was surprised there are so many wedding photographers in Bali. And this is another group. And according to Pak Ketut Ardana, head of the Bali branch of ASIDA, about 80%, and I've mentioned this number before, people in Bali are dependent directly or indirectly on tourism. And restaurants are closed, tourism sites are closed, we're supposed to stay at home. I think I'm going to leave it there right now with the Bali news, and because I want to end it with just one more item, not directly related to Bali or Asia at all, but something that I'm personally sad about, and the singer-songwriter John Prine passed away this week due to complications from the coronavirus. John Prine, if you don't know, was a national treasure, a songwriter that was, his songs were covered widely by many of the stars, American music stars, including Bonnie Raitt, Bob Dylan, and others. And even as far away as China, this morning I read an article in the People's Daily from China talking about the passing away of John Prine. I was fortunate enough to live in Lincoln Park area of Chicago in the late 60s and early 70s, and during the heyday of the folk music scene there, and got to see Prine as a young man when he was just starting out, along with Bonnie Colic and Steve Goodman and so many other great folk musicians then. And I'm going to leave a link here if you want to, if you don't know John Prine, but you're interested in American music or interested in folk music, take a look and listen. An amazing songwriter, grew up in Chicago. He's a Chicago guy. He was born in Maywood, suburb of Chicago, not too far from where I grew up. And he wrote great songs about common people. Just wonderful. And link us to one of my favorite songs here, Hello in There. And with that, let's end the newscast for this week. Take a look tomorrow at my No Name website if you want an update, more complete news about Bali. And that's it for this week. See, my voice is going. Still have some problems with pneumonia. And that's it for this week. Have a good week. Stay at home. Stay safe.